Welcome to the deep dive. We all, hear the mantra for weight management, diet and exercise. But what if you're doing all that, tracking calories, hitting the gym, and the scale just isn't moving?
Right.
Could it be that something else is going on? Maybe something about our sleep or lack of it is actually sabotaging things.
That is the big question we're tackling today. This deep dive, well, we're going to explore that really powerful connection between sleep and weight. It's often underestimated, especially for folks who are doing everything right with food and activity, but still feel stuck.
Yeah, stuck.
Think of sleep as maybe the missing piece of the puzzle for weight management.
Exactly, a missing piece. And to really get our heads around this, we've looked into some pretty compelling research. Today, we'll be drawing on findings from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, some expert insights from Harvard's The Nutrition Source, data from the CDC, and also info on sleep disorders from the Mayo Clinic.
And this is really relevant for you listening. Maybe you're a weight management coach, focused on that whole holistic picture. Or maybe you're personally frustrated because the weight isn't shifting despite your best efforts.
Or just not sleeping well.
Or just not sleeping well, exactly.
Yeah.
This offers a wider lens, beyond just calories in, calories out. We want to give you some actionable knowledge here.
Absolutely. So our mission today is pretty straightforward. Let's pull out the key insights from these sources to really understand how sleep impacts weight. We want to get into the why and offer some things to think about for a more holistic approach to wellness for you or your clients.
Makes sense.
Okay, so let's unpack this. That study from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine,
Wow.
they found healthy adults, right? But those who went to bed late and only got about 4 hours in bed,
Compared to 10 hours, yeah.
they gained more weight, a significant difference.
It really is. And what's so interesting is why they gained it. It wasn't like some metabolic mystery. It was directly linked to just eating more calories overall.
Just eating more.
Yeah, those extra hours awake at night. They just meant more time, more opportunities, basically, to eat. It shows how just being awake longer can mess with our calorie intake.
And it wasn't just more food, right? The study also found that a bigger chunk of the calories they ate late at night came from fat.
Which makes you wonder, do our cravings actually change when we're tired? Do we reach for different things?
Yeah, like comfort food.
Exactly. Maybe our tired bodies instinctively want that energy-dense stuff. Even the researchers were surprised, seeing significant weight gain in a controlled lab setting just by cutting sleep. It really highlights how basic sleep is for managing energy.
Okay, and then there was this other interesting bit. The study mentioned some differences based on gender and race. Men gained more than women, and African Americans more than Caucasians when sleep was restricted.
Yeah, that definitely raises some important questions. Are there different biological factors at play? Or maybe behavioral ones, things that make some groups more vulnerable to weight gain when they're sleep deprived?
Needs more research, I guess.
For sure. As the study pointed out, that's a key area for future work to really understand those specific mechanisms.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit. Harvard's The Nutrition Source talks about hormones and how they regulate appetite. This feels like it connects directly.
Oh, absolutely. They explain the roles of ghrelin and leptin. You can think of ghrelin as the go signal for hunger.
The I'm hungry hormone.
Right. And leptin is the stop signal, the I'm full hormone. Now, what's fascinating is that lack of sleep basically throws a wrench in this whole system.
How so?
Well, ghrelin, that hunger signal, actually increases when you don't get enough sleep. And at the same time, leptin, the fullness signal, decreases.
Oh, wow. So you're getting hit twice. You feel hungrier and less full.
Exactly. It's like the volume gets turned up on hunger and turned down on satiety. And the nutrition source points out this hormonal shift can also drive cravings, often for those high-carb, high-fat foods. The stuff we crave when we're tired.
That makes so much sense. When you're exhausted, a salad probably doesn't sound as good as, say, pizza.
Precisely. And for you listening, if you're struggling with weight, those intense cravings, especially late at night, it might not just be willpower. Your sleep-deprived body could be biologically pushing you towards those choices.
Okay, that's hormones. The nutrition source also talks about the metabolic impact, something about insulin sensitivity. Why does that matter for weight?
Right.
Yeah.
So think of insulin as the key that lets sugar, glucose into your cells for energy. When you're consistently sleep-deprived, your cells can become less responsive to that key. That's reduced insulin sensitivity,
Okay.
which means your body has to pump out more insulin to do the same job.
Oh.
Over time, this can lead to higher blood sugar, potentially insulin resistance, and that's strongly linked to your body storing more fat.
So lack of sleep actually makes your body more likely to store calories as fat, not just burn them.
That's a big part of it, yeah. It changes how your body handles the energy you take in.
Wow.
And there's more. The nutrition source also mentions cortisol, the stress hormone. Lack of sleep can increase cortisol levels.
And cortisol isn't great for weight either, is it?
No, chronically high cortisol is also linked to increased fat storage, especially that dangerous visceral fat around your organs in the belly area.
Man, it really is a cascade, isn't it? Poor sleep triggers hormones, messes with metabolism, and then there's just the simple fact of being tired.
Absolutely.
If you're exhausted from bad sleep, finding the energy for a workout, that's tough.
It really is. And that fatigue, it can absolutely drive cravings for quick energy fixes, usually sugary, high-carb things that, aren't helping the weight goals.
Yeah.
It becomes this vicious cycle.
Yeah, poor sleep, low energy, maybe reach for junk food, maybe skip the gym, which probably doesn't help you sleep better the next night either.
Exactly. It's a tough cycle to break.
So what are the actual recommendations? How much sleep should we be aiming for? The nutrition source and the CDC had guidelines, right?
Yeah, generally, the advice for adults is around 7 to 8 hours of quality sleep per night. That lines up with the consensus from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and the Sleep Research Society. They say 7 or more hours.
Quality sleep, that's important too.
Definitely. And remember, these are general guidelines. Individual needs can vary a bit.
And interestingly, it's not just too little sleep that's a problem. The nutrition source mentioned too much sleep, like over 9 hours consistently, might also have downsides.
That's right. Both extremes, too little and too much, have been linked in studies to increase risks for things like obesity, type 2 diabetes, and cardiovascular disease. So there seems to be a kind of sweet spot for sleep duration for overall health.
A Goldilocks zone for sleep?
Sort of, yeah. And the CDC data looking at sleep habits, especially in teens, is pretty concerning.
What did they find?
A really large percentage of middle and high school students are getting much less sleep than recommended. It just highlights that this isn't just an adult problem, it's a broader societal issue.
And starting those poor sleep habits young could have long-term consequences for weight and health down the line.
Absolutely. Those adolescent years are critical for development and habit formation.
So, okay, we've talked about the immediate impacts. What about the longer-term consequences of chronic sleep deficiency? The nutrition source and Mayo Clinic go into this.
Yeah, when you consistently miss out on sleep, you build up what's called sleep debt. And this chronic deficiency, well, it seriously ups your risk for major health problems. We've touched on obesity and type 2 diabetes.
Because of the hormone and insulin issue.
Exactly. But the risks also extend to heart health, higher chances of high blood pressure, heart disease, even stroke.
And it affects more than just physical health, right? Mental well-being, too.
Oh, definitely. There's a strong link between sleep deficiency and a higher risk of depression. And there's growing research looking into potential links with cognitive decline, maybe even dementia later in life.
Wow.
And the Mayo Clinic really emphasizes that untreated sleep disorders don't just stand alone. They can make existing medical conditions worse. And they really impact mental function, focus, attention, decision-making.
Driving safety.
Driving safety, huge one. Performance at work or school. It ripples out into everything.
And we should touch on sleep apnea again. The AASM mentioned that weight gain itself is a big risk factor for developing obstructive sleep apnea, OSA.
That's such an important cycle to understand. Extra weight, especially around the neck, can narrow the airway, leading to OSA.
Yeah.
But then the disrupted, poor quality sleep from OSA
can mess with hormones and make weight gain more likely.
Exactly. It can become this really challenging feedback loop if it's not addressed.
Okay, so given all this, why aren't people getting enough good sleep? What are the common culprits according to the nutrition source and Mayo Clinic?
Well, they point to several things. A big one is just poor sleep habits. Inconsistent bedtimes and wake times, scrolling on phones or tablets right before bed.
That blue light.
That blue light, yeah. And caffeine or alcohol too close to bedtime. Then there's the sleep environment itself, if it's too noisy, too bright, too hot, or cold. Disruptions to our internal body clock, our circadian rhythm, think, shift, work. Jet lag, that's another major factor. And of course, actual sleep disorders like insomnia, sleep apnea, restless leg syndrome directly interfere.
Anything else?
Yeah, sometimes genetics can play a role in sleep disorders. And underlying medical issues, chronic pain, anxiety, depression, even some medications can definitely disrupt sleep.
It feels like a lot can get in the way of good sleep.
It can seem that way.
But the good news is the sources also offer strategies, right, for improving what they call sleep hygiene?
Absolutely. There are definitely things we can do. Consistency is really key. Going to bed and waking up around the same time every day, even weekends, helps regulate that internal clock.
Even weekends, ugh.
Yeah, ideally. Also, creating a relaxing bedtime routine, like an hour before bed, do something calming, read a real book, hit a warm bath, gentle stretching, maybe some meditation. Signal to your body it's time to wind down.
Makes sense.
Optimizing the bedroom. Dark, quiet, cool. That's huge. And definitely limiting screens before bed because of that blue light messing with melatonin.
The sleep hormone.
Right. Being mindful of caffeine and alcohol, especially later in the day. Getting regular exercise is great for sleep, but maybe avoid really intense workouts right before bed.
Okay.
And finding ways to manage stress during the day can also make a big difference when it's time to sleep.
These all sound like practical things people can actually try. So let's bring this back to our listener, the coach, or the person struggling with weight. How can they recognize if maybe sleep is part of their issue? How does the science show up in real life?
That's the crucial connection to make. So for you listening, think about this. Do you often feel much hungrier than seems normal, even after meals?
Yeah.
Or do you get really strong cravings,
Mm.
especially for sugary, fatty, carb-heavy foods, like irresistible cravings? That
Wow.
could be a sign.
What else?
Difficulty actually resisting snacks. Feeling just too wiped out to stick to your exercise plans. Making impulsive food choices just because you're tired and your judgment feels off. These are all potential flags.
Flags that poor sleep might be undermining your efforts.
Exactly. And remember what the nutrition source said. It's not just how long you sleep, but the quality. Do you wake up feeling genuinely rested? If not, even if you were in bed for 7 or 8 hours, poor quality sleep could still be impacting your weight.
Okay. So wrapping this all up then, if there's one main message, one key takeaway from this deep dive today, what would it be?
I think the biggest thing is this. Quality sleep isn't just nice to have. It's not a luxury. It's a fundamental pillar of health and effective weight management. It belongs right up there with nutrition and exercise.
It's non-negotiable, really.
It should be, yeah. It's not just an afterthought.
And it feels empowering, actually. Thinking that prioritizing sleep isn't passive, it's actively supporting your body's ability to burn fat, regulate hunger, and just function well metabolically.
Precisely. You're working with your body's natural systems. So for you listening, maybe the next step is to just take an honest look at your own sleep. Where could things improve? Based on what we've talked about,
Yeah.
how can you integrate this understanding, maybe into your own life, or if you're a coach, into how you support your clients? Really emphasizing sleep's role.
Yeah, that really does shift the perspective, which leads to a final thought, maybe. Considering how interconnected sleep, diet, and exercise really are, how might things change if we started thinking of rest not just as downtime, but as an active, essential part of a wellness strategy for managing weight? How would that shift our whole approach?
That's a great question to ponder.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.